Last week you noticed something strange outside your house, not several of them, perched silently across the roof, fence, trees, and power lines surrounding your home. And the unsettling part wasn't the number of birds. It was the silence, no chirping, no chaos. Almost like they were waiting for something. Birds gather all the time, right? Same silence. Same strange feeling building in the back of your mind every time you looked outside. And that's where it starts becoming difficult to forget, because birds usually communicate constant momenta. But when multiple birds gather quietly around one location without obvious reason, the human brain reacts differently. It stops feeling random. Here's what most people don't realize: silence changes the way humans interpret behavior. Loud movement feels natural. Quiet observation feels intentional. And once your brain labels something as intentional, it starts searching for meaning automatically. That's why experiences like this stay in people's minds for years. But that's not the real reason this becomes unsettling. The real reason is what silence does to human attention. When birds gather noisily, your brain treats them like background activity. But when they remain still and silent, your attention sharpens. You start noticing every detail, the direction they're facing, whether they're watching the house or you. And suddenly your mind starts asking questions you didn't expect to ask. Why now? Why so quiet? This is where it gets interesting. Scientifically, birds gather silently for many reasons. Sometimes they're resting, sometimes monitoring predators nearby, sometimes reacting to weather pressure changes humans can't detect yet. Certain birds become unusually quiet when they sense environmental tension or uncertainty around them. But here's the strange part: humans sense tension too, not always consciously, but subconsciously. Silence around animals triggers alertness systems deep inside the brain. Throughout human history, sudden silence in nature often signaled danger nearby: storms, environmental shifts. So even today, your nervous system reacts automatically when groups of birds behave unusually quiet. Your brain remembers it. The first thing people notice is timing. The birds don't appear randomly. They gather during specific moments: early morning before the neighborhood wakes up, late afternoon when everything becomes still, sometimes near sunset when shadows stretch longer and ordinary places begin feeling unfamiliar. That timing matters more than people realize, because humans are emotionally sensitive during transition period. Quiet moments between activity. Your mind becomes more reflective during those hours, observant, more vulnerable to emotional interpretation. During those moments, the experience feels amplified, not because the birds changed, your perception did. The second thing people notice is positioning. The birds aren't scattered randomly across the neighborhood. They seem concentrated near your house: roof edges, tree branches facing your window, fence posts close to your yard. And your brain immediately interprets focused attention differently than random movement. Here's what most people don't realize: humans are extremely sensitive to silent observation. Head repeatedly creates subconscious tension inside the mind. That instinct is ancient. Long before modern society existed, noticing eyes watching from a distance could mean survival. So when multiple silent birds remain near one location for extended periods, part of your brain automatically enters monitoring mode. That's why the experience feels difficult to shake off emotionally, even when logically you know they're probably harmless. But that's not the deepest part addition does to meaning. If the birds appeared once, you'd forget it. But when they return again and again, the pattern becomes emotionally heavier. Humans are wired to treat repetition as important information. That instinct helped humans survive for thousands of years. Repeated behavior in nature often signaled change before humans understood the cause. So when silent birds repeatedly gather around your house, your brain automatically assumes something matters about it, even if it can't explain why. And once that thought enters your mind, ordinary bird behavior starts feeling symbolic. This is where it gets even more interesting. Crows remember fates, ravens track routines, smaller birds recognize feeding patterns in safe environments. Many species quietly monitor spaces long before humans notice them, which means the birds may not just be gathering around a structure. They may be reacting to patterns connected to the environment around your home: food availability, warmth, routine human behavior. Emotionally, it still feels personal, because humans naturally anthropomorphize repeated attention. In simple terms, the brain assigns intention and awareness to anything that consistently appears near us, especially in silence. And silence changes everything. The third thing people notice is emotional timing. Many people report noticing these silent bird gatherings during stressful periods of life: grief, burnout, loneliness, big decisions, uncertainty, moments where the mind already feels emotionally overloaded. And because the birds appear during those moments, the brain links the experiences together. Psychologists call this emotional anchoring. External events become attached to internal emotional states. So later, even remembering the birds brings back the feeling connected to that period of life. But that's not the real reason people become obsessed with the memory. The real reason is stillness. Stillness forces awareness. In modern life, humans are surrounded by noise constantly, notifications, movement everywhere. So when several birds gather silently without obvious purpose, It interrupts normal mental pattern longer. You think more deeply. And once something interrupts automatic living, the mind begins attaching significance to it. That's why people remember these experiences so vividly years later. Not because the birds necessarily meant something supernatural, but because for a brief moment, the outside world forced them into awareness. The fourth thing becomes harder to explain logically. Sometimes the birds disappear all at once. After days or weeks of silent gathering, one morning the trees are empty again. The roofline clear. People notice immediately. That alone reveals something important. Because now the absence feels strange too. The birds became part of the emotional atmosphere surrounding the house. Silence became familiar in a strange way. And when that pattern disappears, the environment feels different. How powerfully repetition affects the human brain. But here's where it gets unsettling again. Sometimes people begin waiting for the birds without realizing it. They glance outside automatically, same branches, pause near windows longer than usual. And eventually the birds stop being just birds in the mind. They become supernatural presence. A repeated silent pattern the brain emotionally integrated into daily life. The fifth thing people rarely admit is this. Sometimes they start talking to the birds internally, not out loud at first. Thoughts, observations, small emotional reactions. And while that sounds strange, psychology explains it easily. Humans naturally create emotional relationships with familiar, non-threatening presences, especially during periods of isolation or stress. The birds become symbols of consistency, and humans crave consistency far more than they admit. That's why even silent animal behavior can feel emotionally profound under the right circumstances. Here's what most people don't realize. Humans are storytelling creatures. When something repeats quietly in our environment without explanation, the brain builds narratives around it automatically. Not because humans are irrational, because uncertainty feels uncomfortable. Stories reduce uncertainty. And once the brain creates a story around repeated silent birds, the experience transforms emotionally forever. Now comes the final point. Eventually, many people stop fearing the birds completely. Instead, they begin appreciating them. The same silent gathering that once felt eerie becomes ground, even calming. And that shift reveals something powerful about human nature. Sometimes what unsettles us first is simply stillness. We're so used to constant distraction that silence itself begins feeling unnatural. But when something silent repeatedly enters our awareness, it forces reflection. Never ask for attention, never approach me. And maybe that's why the experience stays with people for so long. Because deep down, humans are desperate for moments that interrupt automatic living. Moments that force them to notice the world again, notice themselves again. If birds ever gather silently around your house without sound, maybe the real meaning isn't hidden in the birds at all. Maybe it's hidden in what you started noticing about your own life while they were there. The quiet you've been avoiding, the thoughts you kept distracting yourself from, emotional exhaustion you stopped admitting. And maybe that's why the memory lingers long after the birds disappear. Not because something supernatural happened, but because for a brief moment, nature made you pay attention. And honestly, that can change a person more than they expect. So next time you see silent birds gathered outside your house, don't immediately rush to explain it away. Just pause for a second carefully. Notice how the moment makes you feel. Notice what thoughts appear in your mind while they're there. Because sometimes the strangest experiences become important not because of what they are, but because of what they quietly awaken inside you. And if something like this has ever happened to you before, if birds gathered silently around your home during a strange or emotional period in your life, share your experience below. Because the unsettling part is realizing you may not be the only one who noticed.